12:07. This is going to take us to the consent agenda. Consider approval of the January 23rd, 2020 minutes. Consider approval of monthly financial statements for January 2020. Is there a motion?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Second? Second? So Sam, motion, Paul, second. Okay. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Marissa, is there anything noteworthy on this that the board may not have read? Okay. And to take us to our next agenda item, which these are I'm sorry.
I did have one comment. If moving forward, maybe we could see the ridership numbers broken down by service instead of lumped together.
Okay.
That would help me just kind of get a better understanding. Thank you.
Information reports. This was a new item that we put in. It's the following reports aren't in the packet for review. There's really no action needed on any of these. And if there's any questions, staff is happy to respond. So, number one, monthly financial reports. Are there any questions for Marissa from the agenda packet? Okay. Number two, Citizens Advisory Team Meeting Recap Report. Any questions for Nicole? Nicole, anything? Okay. And number three, Transformation Initiative Update. Nicole, anything you want to offer?
No, we are right on schedule. I will note that we did, due to scheduling for some of the evaluation committee members, we did have to push out a couple of our dates, but so far we're completely on schedule, and what that did is that just tightened up the time that better questions are allowed. But we're currently getting questions and answering them within the same day, so we don't foresee that as a big problem.
Okay, great. Thank you.
We will be bringing that to the
May. Okay, and that takes us to the regular agenda. Agenda item number one, presentation of audit for fiscal year end 09/30/2019 by Weaver and Tidwell. Marissa?
Good afternoon, board. We had previously had Jennifer discuss with us to present a comprehensive annual financial report for fiscal year ended 2019 and 2018 with Weaver and Tidwell. She's our audit partner, and with her is Kristen Garyberry. She's a senior audit manager. And previously we presented to you on January 23rd the draft of the cover. Today is the final. And along with that is our single audit report. And this goes over the review of our compliance with DCTA's major federal programs. So
Well, thank you all for having me here. You should have two bound reports. The first one is the comprehensive annual financial report, the very pretty, beautiful one. The less exciting one is the Federal Financial Assistance Single Audit Report. As Amber mentioned, my name is Jennifer Ripka. I'm the partner on the engagement. I also have Kristen here with me, and she's the senior manager on the engagement. We're going to briefly go through the audit results, the final audit results, because I've already presented the preliminary ones, and then really turn it over to you all so that you can ask any questions. And if you do have any questions as I'm going through, feel free to step in as well. First, we'll go over the audit itself is performed in accordance with generally accepted auditing standards as well as government auditing standards. So both of those apply to DCTA. We also perform the single audit, which is in accordance with uniform guidance, and that's due to DCTA receiving in excess of $750,000 that they expend for federal financial awards. We also review the NTD data, and we perform agreed upon procedures review over that data that's submitted to NTD. And then we also review compliance of DCTA with several different types of laws, regulations, grant agreements, the Public Funds Investment Act. That's all lumped into that compliance piece. So for the audit of the financial statements, we issued an unmodified opinion. That's considered to be a clean opinion. It's the highest level of assurance that can be placed on a set of financial statements. And when you're reviewing this report, it includes our independent auditor's report, which discloses that opinion. We also review internal controls over financial reporting. And we noted no material weaknesses, no significant deficiencies that don't lead up to a material weakness, and no non-compliance with regards to the financial statements. In conjunction with the federal awards, we issue 2 reports. One is specific to the internal controls and compliance, broad compliance like PFIA. And then the other one is going to be an issuance of compliance over the compliance requirements that are listed for the 2 major programs that we tested. So the first major program is the Federal Transit Cluster. That's similar. We test that almost every single year. It's the majority of the federal financial assistance that the authority receives. And then also this year, Highway Planning and Construction Cluster. That's another federal financial assistance program that we tested. So an unmodified opinion over compliance, and then no material weaknesses, no significant deficiencies, and then no non-compliance that needs to be reported to the federal government. The authority also is listed as a low-risk auditee, and that's a formula. If you've been audited from a federal award standpoint over the past 2 years, if you haven't had any material weaknesses, if you've had issued unmodified opinions, then you fall into a low-risk auditee. There's no such thing as a high-risk auditee, you're just non-low risk. Financial changes. So this year we incorporated the Texas Mobility Corporation into the financial statements. So when you're looking at statements from previous years, you'll notice that there is just 1 column for each year. Going forward, there will be 2 columns, one for DCTA and then one for NTMC. And that's, we go through a process of determining whether or not an entity is considered to be either legally separate or not, which it is legally separate. Then we further dive into it to determine whether or not that component unit is going to be listed as discretely presented or blended. And as the bylaws stood when we did this audit, it was considered to be blended. Now, the bylaws can be, changed, and so that could change in future years, so I will point that out.
And this is the bylaws for NTMC.
Yes.
We just revised the DCTA bylaws,
Yeah.
so that's the bylaws specifically for NTMC.
And so we go through the process of determining whether or not this separate entity is what the financial benefit and burden is of that entity in conjunction with what we consider to be the primary government. We also look at how the makeup of the board is. So a lot of different factors that go into that determination, but just know that we have to review that each and every year because it could change. The financial highlights, there was a 17% increase in cash and investments, $4.4 million, a 9% increase in purchase transportation expense of about $0.8 million, 22% increase in operating assistance grants, $1.2 million. And so when we say that we're testing the federal financial grants, that's a part of what we're doing with that. 70% increase in investment income, and you have to think that's at September 30th, 2019, forever changing, up and down. but that's a point in time. And then the authority ended the fiscal year, and so both DCTA as well as NTMC together for a net position of $327.8 million. With that, I'll move into last meeting. We went through what we consider to be areas of strength and accomplishment. I think it's good to point that out just because not every organization that we audit, we're able to say these types of things, and it's good for any new board members, so that they can see these are things that we look at, things that you all can look to, and kind of as you're going through the years, think, okay, are we still receiving detailed monthly financial information? Are they consistently receiving these awards? All of these types of things, the transparency piece, go into areas of strength for this organization. The timely, efficient audit, so when we come in, everything is ready for us to complete the audit. We get it completed very quickly, and that's due to the hard work and cooperation that you all have, the staff that make up the finance team here. So we're very appreciative of that. The full cooperation of other authority staff, because we don't only terrorize the finance team. Purchasing, budget, we get into everyone's business, unfortunately. And then, as I mentioned, no material weaknesses, and then no findings with regards to compliance. As always, we appreciate the opportunity to serve DCTA, and we look forward to continuing that relationship next year. So, any questions that you all have about either the financial report, the single audit report, or the audit process in general, what we test, what we don't test?
So this is an action item, so we'll be asking the board to vote on this. So if there's any questions for no?
I just answered them all. When
You are so good.
Food coma.
Now don't steal my thunder.
I would like to thank Marissa, Amber, Amanda, and Athena for keeping us compliant throughout the year. I know it's very painful. They have to hold the line. They just do a spectacular job each and every day and at night to keep the agency in good standing. So I know our auditors appreciate it, and I just wanted to thank you on behalf of the rest of the staff and the board for all the hard work that you do.
And thank you guys for the way you come in and you just kind of do what you need to do, and appreciate that so much. Okay, so do I hear a motion for approval? Okay, that would be Sam. Second?
Second.
Okay. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Vote was unanimous, the motion carries. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Agenda item number 2, consider resolution R2002 approving fiscal year 2020 operating budget revision number 2020-02.
Good afternoon. As we navigate,
Amanda.
hi, I'm Amanda. Sorry. As we navigate through the FY20 budget, staff has identified a couple of items that we need to address with a budget amendment that needs to be adopted by the board. If you'll turn to page 94 of the board packet, I'll walk you through the exhibits that we have provided. The total net budget impact of this budget amendment would be $150,000. It is made up basically of legal fees that we've identified. One item that we are having to address, we are moving a budgeted position from the NTMC budget into the DCTA budget. There's zero net impact of that between the two, but we have to address it since we're moving from the two companies. The legal fees, the $69,000 to $11,000, that is specifically for the Locklord contract that was adopted. That's the FY20 budget impact of that. And then the transfers out on the bottom line on page 94, that is an increase to the NTMC budget that DCTA funds. And that is also, sorry, backing up, it's so confusing to do these. It's the first time we've had the two companies to do these. The transfers out is, the 20,000 is on the NTMC side. It is moving that position into the DCTA budget as well as an increase in legal fees on the NTMC side. So that is how you get to the 20,000. So again, the net revision impact is 150,000 on the DCTA budget. On page 95, this is a combined change in net position schedule, letting you see how it works through since the actual budget revision is only DCTA specific. So you'll see the adopted budget for both DCTA and NTMC in the second and third column. There's a column for completed transfers. This is included in the budget information section of this packet, and those all netted. That is just identifying things that we coded to one account and it should have been coded in another. It's more housekeeping items. The net impact was 0 of those. And then you have a total revised budget combined, and then in red is where I've identified where the $150,000, where that impacts the budget. And so the very final column is the proposed revised budget if revision number 2020-02 is adopted.
And one of those legal fees was for our bylaws, right?
That, and I believe just employee legal matters,
Right.
handbook revisions, different things have been identified that were not anticipated in that original
Right.
FY20 budget. Any questions?
Any questions?
Yeah, maybe broader questions,
Okay.
and maybe not for here today, but I'm still having a hard time understanding the finances of NTMC and what last year's rate was versus this year's. You know, are we saving money? Are we costing money? What did we pay in legal fees last year versus legal fees this year? So I can really compare and contrast. And again, this, I don't know if we can get apples to apples because I don't think we've had a full year's worth of data on NTMC either. So, so that's something that would be really helpful to me if we can at least kind of see last year versus this year or budgeted year, so I can get some my head wrapped around that. And then, you know, probably the estimates on those legal fees and whatnot as we plan next year's budget, so I can kind of see partial year, this year, next year, right? So net, we're not adding a new employee, right? We're just moving a procurement specialist position
We're
from.
moving the funding for an FTE from the NTSC budget to the DCTA budget.
So why is that? Because I know we targeted and put everybody in NTM3 for specific reasons. So what's changed?
It's really just the structure of the position. It was the procurement specialist. We may have referred to it as a buyer, I think, during the budget workshop.
Okay.
We had originally budgeted the funds for that in the either the maintenance or the administration budget within NTMC. And once the budget was approved and we were reviewing the position, finalizing the job description, it really became apparent that that needed to be a DCTA position because that position will be writing specs for the agency. All of the purchases will be on behalf of DCTA, so it really became more apparent that that needed to be a DCTA position rather than NTMC.
Okay.
And so that's how we moved that.
So net income is not an issue there, or net revenue change.
Correct.
Does that open up or create other changes, though, that we need to be aware of, like access to different benefits, those types of things? I know that was one of the conversation pieces on MTMC is if they're in MTMC, they get a certain box of benefit structure, and if they're in DCTA, they get a different box.
So the net, you don't see it on there, but on page 95, you can see kind of in that red highlighted column, the difference between moving from the NTMC budget into the DCTA budget was this $1,551 difference.
Christina graciously funded that through part of her professional services budget. So the services line of 148 and some change is a decrease of the $1,500 to make that net zero, and then the addition of legal fees of 150.
Okay.
And then of that 150, the 80,789 is for legal fees associated with NTMC, and then 69,211, that's in that far right column in the middle lighter section, is for the DCTA legal fees, and again, that's for the bylaws, legal fees for the contract.
Okay.
So the total of those two amounts, the 69 and the 80, is what equals the 150 that's actually the true net that impact.
Okay. But have I opened up more costs by moving this I mean, I get that their job is DCTA, so it needs to be DCTA.
Sure.
But
I
it'll
mean,
be
potentially.
more benefit costs, those types of
Sure, I
things?
mean, potentially, when we go through the budget process, we budget vacant positions at the most expensive benefits, and then throughout, as we go into the next year, if a previously vacant position is now filled, we budget based on that specific employee's elections, so that we don't, we're not padding the benefits too much. So that's kind of an always changing, it'll kind of just depend on who is selected for that position, what elections they choose,
Okay.
that sort of thing. But yeah, so the net impact of this is just the 1,500.
Thank you.
Are we paying for services that have already been rendered here, or are we planning for more overruns that are coming in the future?
The 69,000 is for the contract that the board has already previously approved and utilized services.
These are funds that were expended.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
and that's done.
Yeah.
And then the NTMC legal fees is both already incurred legal fees that we've incurred throughout this year, as well as upcoming union negotiations.
Okay, so you're planning for.
Correct.
here's what we think the adjustment's gonna
This should be to get us through the rest of the year. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, so I'll entertain a motion.
Move to approve as presented.
Second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Vote is unanimous, the motion carries. Okay, thank you, Amanda. Agenda item number 3, consider award of RFP 2002 for transit and transportation planning services. Christina?
We have talked about this RFP in the past. As a reminder, DCTA has regularly had an on-call contract with a transit and transportation planning consultant to help us with a myriad of activities in order to progress the agency forward. In the past, we've used these consultants to do transit-oriented development planning, service planning, Title VI analysis, corridor development planning, so a number of planning activities. So with this contract that we're asking for approval today is for 2 different consultants. One is AECOM and the other one is Kittleson. Both of them have a very deep bench of skilled professionals that can help the agency in various initiatives for planning and for operations. We do anticipate for this fiscal year, we have some funds budgeted that we anticipate post-transformation initiative results that we can progress our long-range service plan update. We're a little overdue on having that done. We feel that doing the long-range service plan after the transformation initiative is probably the best way to go about that. There was also some discussion among the board previously about wanting to do some transit-oriented development and land use studies. So we anticipate maybe starting a task order this fiscal year for that activity as well. From the operations side, they are often in need of some service planning and route planning assistance, as well as Title VI analysis for those changes. So those are really the things we see doing this fiscal year, kind of light on activity for the remainder of this fiscal year. But once we have board vision and transformation initiative results, we do anticipate using these contracts moving forward in the next several years. On page 96 and 97, you'll find the memo for this item. And per requested by Vice Chair Gilmore in the past for initiatives like this, we've included the RFP on page 99, as well as proposals for the 2 firms that we are seeking award for today, for AECOM on page 130 and Kittleson on page 175. So unless there are any other questions, staff recommends approval of these 2 contracts.
I did have a couple quick ones. So where did the $400,000 estimate come from?
So typically, we looked at our budget, and the planning budget had $300,000 allocated for FY20 for planning services. So typically, there's about that amount, depending on what activities the board is wanting the staff to do within a fiscal year. And then operations typically has some work that needs to be done as well. So 400 seemed to be something that would cover us for budgeted items for each fiscal year.
And this is
So-
contract value, not, not budget.
Okay.
Any task order or contract that exceeds 75,000.
Right, has to come to us.
Board.
But there was an anticipation of in $75,000 increments or higher, or I guess it could be lower.
That oftentimes
Of up to
is any
400,000.
higher that we would bring back to the board.
Yeah. So does that? I mean, is there a reason that $300,000 number came up? I mean, are there specific projects? Is there a list of anticipated projects?
Yes, when we went through the budgeting process,
Mhm.
there the anticipated projects that I mentioned, COD and land use. We've also been previously, we have been working on A-train extension northbound, southbound, as well as exploring the KCS corridor. So we've already spent some of the funds for this fiscal year, and there's a little bit remaining. Again, this fiscal year will be rather light on activity on this contract. But with forward direction, I anticipate that we'll have some more activities moving forward.
And we can come back with a list of.
I would say that for backup, for future conversations, when we have these kinds of items, if they are hinged on, we think these are the things that are going to be happening. I know we've had conversations, but if I could get that kind of as a list of here's what we anticipate in 1920, here's the board's recommendations to this point, just a quick summary of what drives those numbers.
Okay.
You all live it, I don't. And so having that pop up kind of goes to my question about zones the other day with Raymond on a phone call that will probably come up a little bit later. That helps me just understand where this is being generated. And does it make sense? Or is it something, okay, we assume $300,000 a year because it's always been what we've always done. Well, is that a good decision? I don't know.
Well, it's very possible that $400,000 combined may not be enough for activities.
Sure.
We'll have to come back to the board asking for an
Sure.
increase in the contract.
But some context around it would be really helpful for memo purposes moving forward, just in general.
Yeah. Can you tell me in simple terms what the difference between these two firms is? Like, why do we want to have a contract with both of them?
Yes, so AECom has a deep local bench. Everybody on their team is from the DFW area, the majority of their team, all their team leads. And some of them have had experience with DCTA in the past. The Kittleson firm is very well known in the transit industry for assisting with the first last mile connections and some transit planning, service planning services. We felt it was important to have two. We've had two in the past, and it works very well because if we have tasked one firm with a couple projects, sometimes their capacity can be limited for those individuals that we may want to be working on our projects. So having another firm available to assist us with projects in the event there's a capacity issue is always a very good thing to have.
Okay, so I'm not losing my mind. Their expertise overlaps a lot. We just kind of want to have these people, we have filled their plate, we want to have a backup.
Yes.
And sometimes they present and propose and it looks great and you do a couple of projects and on a particular expertise, they might be light where the other one might actually have more strength, and it benefits the agency to have two different benches to go to.
Are you requiring them to submit competitive proposals for every task order?
No.
Okay.
Because we've identified that AECom really is best suited for certain aspects of the contract, where the other one is more of the service planning, and the.
It doesn't preclude us from doing that, though.
Right, it doesn't preclude us from. So if there is an opportunity where we look at them and we think they both could be options for a particular service, then we would ask them both to submit.
Yeah, I'm just curious.
Good question.
Did you do interviews or?
We did. So we had, of all of the firms selected, or all the firms that submitted proposals, we selected 3 to bring in for interviews, and from those 3, we selected 2. Any other
comments? Okay, so staff is asking for approval.
So moved.
Okay, first and second, any further questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
The vote was unanimous, the motion passes. Okay, agenda item number 4, consider approval of City of Denton Trail Maintenance Interlocal Agreement. Christina?
Yes, so this item can be found on page 202. With our A-frame rail trail that was built adjacent to the A-train corridor, there are conversations with cities along the corridors that DCTA would build the trail, and the cities within that jurisdiction would be responsible for the maintenance of that trail. So this is the City of Denton Trail, that agreement that we've been working on for a couple of years. But now that the trail is completed, we're very happy to bring this forward. The City of Denton staff has already looked through the agreement and has given the thumbs up, so we're bringing it to the board for approval today. And we will have one for the Louisville Trail hopefully next month. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
It's been approved again.
No, but they're already maintaining they've already taken on responsibility of what we're asking for them to do.
They're doing it, we're just memorializing.
Correct.
Correct. Okay. Okay, motion for approval? Okay. Sam, second?
Second.
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
The vote is unanimous, the motion passes.
For future
Yeah.
packets, can we get maps? I'd love to see the trail sections that, I mean, we've got the sides, but I didn't see, like, this is the part that Denton's taken on. It's memorialized in the document, but
Sure.
I love pictures.
Okay.
Thank
We
you.
can add that one to the next one.
Okay, agenda item number 5, consider award of interlocal cooperation agreement with the Interlocal Purchasing System, tips for cooperative, a lot of cooperative purchasing. Athena?
Good afternoon. So I'm back again to ask for permission to enter into an interlocal agreement with another cooperative that we have found that is available for our use. This cooperative does meet all of the state of Texas bidding requirements and laws. And we can purchase off of this agreement with not having to go out for bids. If we determine that the price is fair and reasonable and it's in line with our budget, then we can just utilize this to make purchases without going through a procurement process. Helps expedite the time involved to do projects.
Any questions for Athena? Motion for approval?
Move as presented.
Got that, Randy? Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
The vote is unanimous, the motion carries. Agenda item number 6, consider approval of agreement for award transportation development credits. And Raymond, this is yours.
Sure, on page 221 through 224 is background on these transportation development credits. These are credits that are used in support of programs that the board has already approved through the budget process or capital projects. Best way to think of it is it's when a federal apportionment on a particular project, let's say it's 80% that the feds will pay, typically an agency will, or the local government will have to pay the other 20%. So on $1 million project, we get $800,000 of federal money, we'd have to put up $200,000. Transportation development credits spend like real money. They're not actual money, but they take the place of having to put the local share into a federal project. So these, one of the requests that come as part of this process is a request from the COG that issues the transportation development credits. They want a letter signed from the president of DCTA saying that we plan on using the credits for their original intent. Otherwise, they would obligate those to, or reuse those credits for someone else. Because it's over $1 million, I believe it's $4.1 million. I'm bringing that to board before I sign the agreement to make sure that you're okay with me signing it. So we're asking for you to approve this item.
So this is $4.1 million that we would be using in TDCs in lieu of local cash out of our budget.
Move to approve as presented.
Okay. Second? Okay, Sam, second. All those those in favor say aye. Aye. That was unanimous, motion carries. Thank you. Agenda item number 7, consider approval of transition of Highland Village Connect shuttle service to enhance LIV subsidy program. Michelle?
Thank you. So just a little background, in Highland Village, there are currently 2 services. There's the Highland Village Connect Shuttle, which is a limited stop AM PM peak service. In the AM, it runs clockwise, and the PM, it runs counterclockwise. And then there's also the Highland Village Lift Subsidy Program, and at this time, it's only operated Monday through Friday, 5 a.m. to 9 p.m., and a trip is subsidized up to $10. So the first $10 DCTA pays, anything above and beyond that, the customer pays. Based on the ridership, we have not seen the ridership develop on the Highland Village Connect shuttle, and staff is recommending that we discontinue that service and in exchange enhance the existing Lyft program. The first enhancement would be to increase that subsidy from $10 to $13. Because looking at past trips, there aren't, the majority of the trips are within or under that $10. It's actually within a $6, but we do see spikes in trips that go above that $10 of the current subsidy. And then the second one is to add Saturday service that would better mirror the service we have available in Louisville and Highland Village. The financial impact, so we currently have in the budget just under $230,000 budgeted in fiscal year 2020 for the Highland Village Connect shuttle service. As through January, the end of January, we've expended $64,000, which is a little over $164,000. The average trip calculated based on the average cost of the trip to DCTA. With the remaining funds, we could provide over 12,600 trips. And so there is sufficient funding left in the Highland Village Connect shuttle budget to fund any increase in ridership on the Lyft subsidy program. And so staff's recommendation is that we discontinue the Highland Village Connect shuttle and do the 2 enhancements to the Lyft subsidy program.
Do you mind just to give people orientation on what the current Highland Village zone actually includes, because it's not just Highland Village?
Correct. So the current so the purple line is the current Highland Village Connect shuttle route that you see, and then sort of the light purple shading is the Lyft zone itself. Like I said, it includes portions of all of Highland Village as well as portions of Louisville, because we wanted to make sure that we got in the hospital and a few other locations. And at this time, we're not recommending any change to the Lyft zone itself.
So, talk to me about the 33% increase from $10 to $13. What rides are showing up in that $13 range? Is it a time of day issue? Is it a distance issue? I know Lyft has that variable pricing, but have we found a pattern to why those go from an average of $6 to a max of 13?
We do not receive ridership data at that level from Lyft, and so the data that they provide us does not allow us to look for that type of trend. But what we did look at is by month, the amount of trips, the lowest fare. So it looks like in general every month the lowest fare is under $6. We have a high fare that goes anywhere from $10.34 to $18.45. And so we looked at, in order to increase, where do we increase that covers a little bit more of that, but not necessarily everything.
Okay. And that's geocoded with Lyft, so that $18 fee is not because they went outside of the zone. It's
Correct.
It's
Right.
only what's within the zone.
Day, it could be capacity versus demand at that time the individual requested.
It's usually distance-based is probably the majority of the cost associated with it, so likely those trips are coming down into Louisville and reverse trip back. The rest of it is time of day, but yeah, it's a good point. Now,
It's a very high level, so we don't get individual ridership information. We get the number of trips taken within a certain time period, and it's anywhere from 2 to 4 hours. And then it tells you to and from, but based on zip code. So it's a very high level of data. Versus on our demand response service, we know the number. So in Lyft, we can tell how many unduplicated riders there are. So we do know if one individual has taken all 100 trips, or if it's 20 individuals that have taken them. But the data that DCTA collects that we have access to, it not only tells us that, but it tells us the broken up into two, maybe three at max, and so you can't really tell where folks are.
Does Wood not have that?
Oh, yeah, they do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For Lyft and Uber, it's predominantly been a privacy issue.
Yeah.
If you're a mass transit rider, you can just pay cash and get on and nobody knows anything about you. You really start getting into the sensitivity of who's riding,
know
why
where
are they
you
riding.
went.
Pardon me? We know where they went, but we don't know who you are.
Well,
It is
We know where they started and where they ended, but within like, I'm not good at, 100 yards, like a football field, it's, you know generally where they were, but you don't know exactly where they went.
Okay, well, within 100 yards.
Because they don't stop at a stop, right? They stop at the actual arrest.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm within 100 yards is fine. I mean, the first guy that talked to us said it's real important to have the data.
Yeah.
If we don't have the data,
Yeah.
then we're not going to be able to plan.
It's a question of what data. I think Christoph was referring to travel patterns, origin destinations. We get that. Knowing that you were at the corner of X and Y at a particular time is not data that Uber or Lyft want to share, and likely information that we don't want to have.
It's not about the time, it's about the location. Where do we get them? Where do we take them?
All the time is helpful.
And, well, I mean, that would tell you maybe like.
Afternoon
what's
routes versus
happening.
evening
I mean,
routes.
I'm not saying it's
Yes.
not helpful, I'm just saying.
Right.
Maybe. And what I heard her say first was, we know what zip code you're in, which ain't helpful.
No, because we share zip code with Louisville.
Yeah, but then I think I'm hearing that's not.
No, 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 we share with
They're
you.
large, they're fairly large, and Lyft determines what those zones are.
Was it 100 yards or is it?
I am not good at distance. I was reading that.
It's 100 zip codes.
I mean,
I was thinking football field, that seems like a long way to run.
I'm just saying.
But
You
Highland
said
Village
both.
is 5.5 square miles, so we're in those 5.5.
Okay, so it's not 100 yards. Did somebody tell me that?
Will we be
100
working
yards?
on our contract with,
I don't know. I didn't.
Yeah, the data that they'll give you.
will
is
we
a-
be doing any renegotiating with our Lyft contract?
For the
For this-
detail, for more
Maybe
detail?
get more detail.
Well, that's what I was thinking. If we are going into looking at the contract again, perhaps more
No,
detail,
we-
maybe they
we've-
break it
We've already
down.
established the contracts. This is not specific to DCTA.
No,
This is a national
AFTA
issue.
is addressing the issue.
Ah.
And that's one of the reasons, not just the only, but it's one of the reasons why there's not federal subsidies for these types of private services, because they don't provide the same level of information that's required by the federal government. Now, the feds are recognizing that the mandate to have this information is detrimental in many ways to the adoption of these services, because if I put a ride on Lyft, I lose the ridership count as far as NTD is concerned.
Mhm.
So they recognize that. We've visited with the chief administrator of the FTA. They recognize that they're having to relook at their laws. But Uber has, in many cases, chosen just not to bid. They didn't bid on our project for the very fact that we request data they're not willing to share. And for them, transit is a very small piece of what they're doing. They're trying to facilitate and work with us because they recognize that linked trip is important. But when you look at the global focus of what they're trying to achieve, it's moving a lot of personal trips back and forth. So if they had to err on one side or the other, I don't think they're interested at this point to do what's required to give it what they consider as a competitive advantage. And that's one of the reasons they choose not to share that data. They feel that their algorithms, the way they work, where to be, timing, and what do they call it, AI, that gives them a competitive advantage, and so they're just not willing to share that data. So it's kind of it's a double-edged sword. They provide benefit and flexibility and door-to-door service and much lower cost in some cases than what we're able to provide. But at the same time, we don't get the fidelity that we're able to deliver ourselves.
How does the subsidy work?
So within that zone, that light kind of grayish purple area, they do what they call a geofence. So they literally go onto a CAD system, they draw lines, and they create a zone. So anyone that is picked up or dropped off in that zone If they download the Lyft app, they put in a code that's given to them, and as long as in that area, if they go out of that area, that trip no longer applies. If they're on the other side of that geo fence, the code won't apply, there's no subsidy that's applied, we don't pay for the trip.
And they only have to enter that code in one time, and it stays in their wallet. So like, I have taken a trip once, so it's in there, every time I'm in the zone, that coupon discount will come up and be applied.
Okay, so that's a code we give to the user, and the user then gives to
Lyft,
Yeah,
yes.
sorry.
Yes, you have to have your own, as a user, you have to have your own Lyft app. You have to have your credit card attached to it, just like you would if you were using it anywhere else. And just like using Lyft, you have to choose your origin and your destination up front. And so at that point is when it determines whether or not it will access the code.
And that's in lieu of driving our own vehicles and having operators that are there to deliver.
I'm just trying, I'm thinking through
Yeah.
how we can get the data from the user, not from Lyft. If they're generating a code, and that code came from our app, could,
Lyft actually generates the code, we just promote the code.
okay. I'm just,
Yeah, it's information.
I mean, we could track, if we could make our users use our app in some way in connection with that, disclosing to them that we're gonna find out where you started and where you stopped. We can have the data, not from Uber.
Can I just,
Well,
just,
let me ask a question real quick. The total, so the subsidy increases 33%, but what about the total cost to the agency?
It's much lower, yeah.
It's not every.
Because what we're using is we're using excess capacity that we don't pay for. When we put our own vehicles and our own drivers out there, they're running a route from 5 to 9 p.m., whether someone's getting on the vehicle or not. So
Right, but
that's-
why isn't that, could that be in this action item? Like the cost comparison of what it is today using our own equipment versus this? I mean, because
Sure.
when you read this item, it talks about increasing a subsidy, that causes some people to say, wait a minute, subsidy?
Okay.
So, if you had the cost comparison, it might help out.
Michelle, do you have that information available? The difference?
No, I have the cost per trip on, for the current Lyft service. The average cost per trip I don't have for, Highland Village.
Well, and I think to expand that out, we're dropping a route, so there's revenue
Savings.
captured savings there, so.
Correct, and we're able to reallocate vehicles and the operators that we're utilizing. the
Right,
service as well to cover.
but to the point, what's
Yes.
the net movement as opposed to we're saving money?
It's a net reduction, but we're not
I'd like to
showing
see
it.
an actual dollar.
Yeah, and the other thing that jumped into my mind reading this is like, this is the conversation at the front end of the meeting about having a comprehensive network plan, multimodalism, multi-use of assets, all that kind of stuff. This is exactly what that looks
Correct.
like. I wonder if this kind of action doesn't wait until we've gotten further down the road on what our ultimate plan is. I'm sure there's reasons to do it now as opposed to months from now. But at the very least, being able to recognize that there's an immediate cost savings here, here's
Right.
the numbers would help something like this ideal.
Yeah, there is an immediate cost savings. When we put the service into Highland Village, several years ago, we put 3 services in. And at the time, we knew there was redundant service in place. But the reason for doing that was to determine, to let the consumer
Bubbles.
determine what was most effective. So we had a on-demand service, 2 of our own vehicles, 2 of our own drivers, using a service much like Lyft, and very few people rode it. It was very expensive. It was over $300,000 a year to provide that service. So we naturally stopped that service. We had the circulator, which we're talking about now, this Connect service, and then we had Lyft. And Lyft has been growing. The ridership has just not taken off on the existing service that we have. We have driver shortages that we're trying to address. We have cost profiles that we know that, I mean, we can certainly delay it. It's just, and we've asked the city of Highland Village, who gets the service, and they would prefer that we move to the Lyft subsidy. So the subsidy has grown a bit, but the overall cost of service delivery is significantly lower, and it lowers the pressure on trying to put people in seats when we're struggling to hire folks. So we can certainly do a better job moving forward and getting you better data as far as how much savings are required. If you want to wait a month, we can. I would prefer that we go ahead and make the change and we come back to you next month with the results of that. That's
I'm
what
alright
I would
with that.
recommend.
But I think just going forward, if I've got to make a financial decision, I'd rather have numbers than we're saving money.
Okay. Very good. Point
Um,
taken.
Highland Village is going to be okay with the loss of ADA?
Well, no,
No,
if
we
we
won't
need
lose ADA.
Okay.
ADA, we call DCTA.
Okay.
So the city manager and the mayor and I have had a discussion. I've ridden everything, and there's nobody on it, and it's not efficient. It's easier for our people in a 5.5 square mile to pick up the phone, call Lyft, and subsidize, and just subsidizes instead of this vacant thing going around when we have a shortage. And so, although it is important for us to see what things are going to look like, this is a cost saving. Maybe we don't know the exact number. It is a cost saving. It's Highland Village asking, just let us have one service that works for our city.
Well, I think too, the customer experience is,
Yes.
that it's door to door versus the shuttle that
Right.
runs a fixed route. So there's a customer experience enhancement to that as well.
Sure.
And the paratransit is not going away, the access service is still available for those.
Okay,
Right.
good.
Right.
Good.
Yeah,
That was,
Completely different service.
because
No,
they
we
don't
wouldn't-
offer it as a Lyft or an
No,
Uber, so.
no, and that was one of our questions to staff.
Okay.
If we need, wheelchair, and so they said, no, we would certainly offer that. So Highland Village is requesting that we do this at this time. Any further questions?
Move to approve as presented with the understanding that we'll see the budgetary numbers next month.
I'll second that.
Any further questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
The vote was unanimous, the motion carries. And that takes us to agenda item number 8. This is also an item that Mayor Watts has asked us to consider tabling. He would like to be here for this conversation at our next meeting. So I would entertain a motion to table.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
The vote was unanimous, the motion carries. This will be tabled to our March meeting. And then this takes us to agenda item number 9, discussion of local and regional transportation and legislative issues. So, operational special movements, do we want to go to Michelle?
Just really quickly wanted to provide an update. We had a couple of special movements last month. One was an inclement weather shuttle that was on January 10th where we transported 18 passengers. The major one was the funeral for Louisville Fire Chief Ken Kittle on January 24th. We provided 3 vehicles. 2 of the vehicles operated from 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. and then one from 11 to 2 p.m. and we transported 152 passengers. I also just quickly wanted to provide an update on the Monsignor King outreach that we talked about last month. So we've seen an increase in ridership to date. We've served just over 1,000 individuals. We've had a minimum of 13 trips a day, a maximum of 53 for an average daily of about 36. But because of the minimal amount of time that we're using to actually provide those trips, the passengers per revenue hour are in the 90s, which is fairly good. So we're continuing to monitor that service as well.
Any questions for Michelle? Okay, our Corinth Station update.
Sure. This is an interesting and very complex project. Not Corinth, but the idea of putting in an infield station in Corinth. It provides a lot of options and possibilities. We've had consultants on behalf of the city of Corinth pouring over engineering estimates, designs, different options for what a station might look like. It gets further complicated when we start thinking about concepts of the city of Corinth joining in. By doing so, what other asset improvements can we do along the system to improve the ability to recover when we have a delay. We have some this railroad is predominantly a single track railroad. So if we have a delay, it pretty much will be there for the majority of the day, and it's very, very hard to recover. So when we talk about on-time performance issues, whether it be with PTC, a gate, or an encounter of any sort, whether it be mechanical or with a pedestrian, it causes delays. So one of the rules of engagement with the city of Corinth, we made it very clear that it's not just about buying a piece of land and putting it in a station, that there needed to be some accretive value to the entire system, including with the city of Corinth, that we would look at the system and determine whether or not there's some additional double tracking or other improvements that can be made. So that doesn't sound too complicated. Well, then we had PTC that slowed the entire system down. We have a second phase of money to make improvements that can take the form of some civil engineering, track geometry changes, which isn't too expensive, that can help speed up the railroad. There's some additional technology that needs to be applied from PTC. And you take all of these different complex issues, and if you look at each one of them, it'll yield a completely different answer. So the question really is, we have $4 million of PTC budget. We have Corinth trying to figure out what is it they need to build. It's logical and most likely probable that if they do build a station, that some additional double tracking around the Corinth station could not only help with boarding and lightings along the station, but would also help in improving the resiliency of our railroad if we added a couple of miles worth of track. But to give everybody an answer, this board, the city of Corinth, staff's ability to figure out, well, what happens if we have 3 miles versus 2 miles versus no double track? What is the effect on the resiliency or the recoverability of our system? Because if we came back and said, well, it's going to be $50 million, probably everybody in the room would throw up their arms and go, well, that's crazy. We're not going to spend that much money. But if there's an opportunity to leverage the money that we have with PTC, that the adding double track will help everybody, including the existing cities, ultimately helping our customers, wouldn't it make sense if we looked at this in a holistic way? So we did phase 1, phase 2 with Corinth, yielded an answer, didn't yield the entire answer. We had the consultants look at PTC, yielded yet another set of answers. We had to go back and ask the folks that are doing this very complex dynamic modeling to give us an answer of what does it look like in parts, what does it look like in whole, and how much resiliency do we actually get if we spent yet another $20 million. If the answer is only 30, 45 seconds, probably not a good spend. If it's 4, 5, 6 minutes, it might be a lot. I mean, it'd be very good because speed matters when you have long distances to cover. And each one of those trips, if it's 5 or 6 minutes, just think about the cumulative effect over the day if we get behind. So we're in the last throes of the modeling. We should be getting some answers by the end of this month. We'll need to review those. We'll likely in March be able to get back to the city of Corinth and this board on what all of those permutations are. We will bring the consultants in that did the modeling to give you an overview, technical overview, allow you to ask questions, but hopefully by then we'll have a much better understanding of all of the different variables that go into making this souffle, if you will, that will give us an opportunity to decide how we proceed. So that's where we are. Any questions? Okay, thank you. And that'll bring me to the other interesting initiative that has presented itself over the last couple of months. I was invited by the COG to a meeting at DFW Airport that I almost didn't attend. And the reason for it was about zero emission highway, the I-45 zero emission highway initiative. And I looked at that and go, well, is that a good use of my time? So I thought, probably not. I mean, we have nothing to do with I-45. So I got a call and a couple of emails. We'd really like DCTA to attend. So I said, okay, I'll figure out how to move some things around. I walk into the room, and Frito-Lay, PepsiCo, DFW Airport, a lot of tech vendors, predominantly from hydrogen energy companies, were there. And the North Central Texas Council of Governments went through a initiative where they were applying for a federal grant to qualify the I-45 project from, corridor from Houston downtown Dallas as a zero emissions highway. There's one similar to this in California. They've been working on it for probably close to a decade. Well, they applied for a grant and they got the money. But the money was for a plan for a future plan is how would you create a zero emissions highway. There's two leading technology that they're looking at. One is, everybody's familiar with, is electrification. Electric trucks, electric vehicles, how would you electrify charging stations from Houston to Dallas. The other one is hydrogen. When you look around the world, hydrogen's been around, or a concept for transportation as a clean energy, efficient energy. The problem with hydrogen is it's hard to get to the hydrogen molecule in a very efficient way. The cost of transportation is expensive. And the feds have done a fairly decent job of seeding or providing seed money and federal grants from the DOD, DOE, and FTA over the years around hydrogen. I would say that in the last 5 years there's been a lot more movement around hydrogen and electrification. The issue with electrification, and more of the federal dollars are available for those types of projects, but even the electric power companies will tell you that if 10% of the population moves to buying electric vehicles, I believe Ford's supposed to announce 7 new electric vehicles to the marketplace in 2021. Tesla, everyone else is on that bandwagon. If 10% of the population moves to that, there's not going to be enough energy to energize those vehicles. You start putting big trucks. Alliance was looking at a autonomous vehicle initiative. They are looking at it. They're going to have to increase the amount of electricity on site by 4 times what it is today. And there's not a clear path for how they're going to do that. So hydrogen has become a very interesting technology. There's different ways to get to hydrogen, gas reformation. You can do electrolysis on water to separate the oxygen molecule from the hydrogen molecules. But there was a lot of discussion about, well, what does it mean to energize the I-45 corridor and to bring hydrogen? And so I proposed 2 alternatives. One, which is the hydrogen highway. But another option is to think about it in a little bit different way. And the Japanese are doing this with, I believe, the 2020 Olympics, where they're actually going to be moving the majority of the Olympic athletes around Olympic venues using hydrogen buses. And so it's going to be a big announcement in Japan about hydrogen. The financial the financial industries around the world are, what we're hearing from Goldman Sachs and others, that there's going to be a lot of investments, private side investments being made in hydrogen moving forward. So the second option is to create a hub city or a hydrogen city where natural gas is already formed, and that's through the either waste treatment plants, landfills that create a lot of methane. You can recover methane, you can reform methane, and you can convert it into hydrogen, and when it burns clean, and the byproduct is water. So a very clean solution. So I opened my mouth in this meeting and said, well, here's an option. Well, as it turns out, the COG, a lot of the tech companies are very excited about the idea of a city like Louisville, because we have landfills, we have a waste treatment plant, we have access to gas. The state of Texas is the largest producer of natural gas, and so there's a lot of natural resources. The state of Texas already is the leading producer of hydrogen in the country. What's missing is a catalyst project that will allow scale. So that's what's happening now, is that the feds are starting to fund projects called H2 at scale. They're not scaling into the hundreds of millions of dollars, but they are funding projects moving forward. There's a lot of federal dollars that are going to become available starting really now over the next 6 months, if there's interest from transit authorities to do so. We have a lot of support from the COG. I have met with the city of Louisville, the city manager, their fleet staff, the folks that are over the landfills and the waste treatment plant. And there's a lot of synergy, I believe, in this idea of bringing international investment into this region. There's a lot of interest on their part. They say that there's really not been a catalyst project like we're conceiving here, where we could actually leverage the hydrogen. So there's the infrastructure that it takes to reform or make the hydrogen. There's a requirement to have a fueling station or more in the area so that you can get to the hydrogen. And then DCTA in the city of Louisville, because we have captive fleets, much like a lot of these folks around here, from forklifts to large vehicles, could then have a source of hydrogen to use to start converting their fleets over. Now this sounds like a huge undertaking, not one that DCTA is interested in doing on our own, but we are certainly a willing participant, or we should be, in advancing technology. So I have been asked over the last year and a half or so, as I've been out in meeting with councils and other stakeholders in the area, what is DCTA doing about providing clean tech, if you will? We've been hesitant to go by way of electrification for a lot of the reasons I've already talked about. There's a lot of cost associated with the infrastructure. The other issue with the electrification is you can only go so far with electric charge, and you're having to start recharging, and the amount of additional vehicles that we would potentially need to have would be significant. So I also wanted to make sure that we weren't buying in too early into the electric buses, because you want to make sure that the technology is well thought out, well engineered. So probably second, third, maybe even fourth generation battery technology. I believe the industry is there. You're starting to see a lot more agencies adopting or buying 10s, 20, 30 electric buses, but they're not able to get past that point, because the next investment to get to 1,000 buses means that you have to have a significant amount of energy being supplied. And it's my belief that you're seeing people stopping at that point because it doesn't scale very well right now, because the grid infrastructure doesn't support it. So I believe that it makes a lot of sense for DCTA, and we're going to go to the point of clean tech that we have. And I've had a conversation with TJ, with just recently, yesterday, with Mayor Watts, and I presented this as a potential. He mentioned that the Denton landfill produces a lot of methane, more than they're actually able to use at this point, so they're going to get interested in looking at this as well. So this isn't a DCTA sponsored initiative. It's actually a North Texas initiative where the COG is very supportive. I believe that the city of Louisville is interested in participating. No commitments yet, but I think there's a lot of interest in looking at things. So I wanted to bring it to the board's attention. We have been asked to, as these grant opportunities are coming up, typically what will happen is they'll ask us to write a executive summary of a project. We just did that. We sent that in, I think, a couple of days ago, last Friday. No commitment. It's just a concept paper that went to the Department of Energy, who has funding available. If they like our idea, they may ask us, or they would ask us to submit a more detailed project plan, and that's where, at some point, if we actually go after federal dollars, that we would have to commit local share. The idea of the local share would come in multiple flavors. The idea is really to create a 5-year strategy around hydrogen, to make sure that the private sector understands what their role would be. There's a lot of interest, as I mentioned before. I believe that there's a lot of opportunity to bring private dollars into a project like this. So if DCTA and cities decided they wanted to get involved, if we actually go after federal dollars, that we would likely do that for infrastructure and for vehicles. That provides the demand for the hydrogen, and that the private sector would then invest in bringing the hydrogen to the table. So more to come on that. Just want to give you an update on the thoughts, and there's been a lot, in my opinion, a lot of interest and movement in this space in a very, very short amount of time. I did have the opportunity to speak with Michael Morris in passing, really just, it was late last week, and he says, I'm a big advocate for hydrogen. Let us know what we can do to help support you. The landfill in Dallas produces a tremendous amount of methane. I believe that the experts on the technology side around the world that are looking at this are saying Texas really makes sense to be a leader in hydrogen. North Texas makes sense because of all the development and all the industry, forklifts, trucks, everything that are in a very small geography. And I just think it's a great opportunity for DCTA to be engaged in City of Louisville, City of Denton in a project like this. So that concludes my comments on that.
Okay. Any questions or comments or? Okay, takes us on to our next agenda item. There's no need to go into executive session. That takes us down to future agenda items and board member requests. Typically, this is a time that the board would be entering into our budget season, but with our transformation initiative, I think we just, at this point, let that be work to help us with our strategic direction at that point. Any thoughts or comments on that? Are y'all okay with that? Okay.
For agenda items just from today's discussion, if I can list those, make sure I didn't miss anything. The agenda packet, oh, no, that's something different. The Highland Village cost comparison, we'll bring that back next month. The comptroller comment period and budgetary implications, as well as the two tabled events, which was, or two tabled items for the closed session, for annual CEO performance review, as well as item number 8, the renegotiation of the two third-party service contracts.
Okay, report on items of community interest. I'll go ahead and talk about Kids Castle in Highland Village. We have an amazing parks director. Kids Castle was built a long time ago, was burned down by some arsonists, and we rebuilt it. But we are now tearing it down, rebuilding it so that every single person that enters that area can be accommodated to, children in wheelchairs, children with special needs. So it's going to be a state-of-the-art type of place, and if anybody's interested in volunteering, it's a great project, and we're real excited about what that's going to look like, and the need to serve all our constituents and neighbors.
Mayor Wilcox actually presented that yesterday at the luncheon and was asking for volunteers from around. It's not just a Highland Village volunteering opportunity, so DCTA is going to take an afternoon and go out and help build the Kids Castle.
We have our Rails to Trails event coming up April 18th, which is a Saturday. And so we have partners from the entire 35 corridor. So from the city of Denton, UNT, Denton Pipe is going to be there, NCTC, TWU I believe is going to be there, Lake Dallas, Corinth, Highland Village, City of Louisville, and also DCTA. So we will have activations along the 19-mile rail trail, all the way from the downtown Denton Transit Center to the Hebron Station here in Louisville. So more information to come, but please mark your calendars for April 18th. The event's from 9 to 12. We'd love to have you out to one of the activation spots or more. We'll also be offering free A-train rides that day, so that if you want to hit several of the pop-up activations on the trail, that you have access to do that. And then I also just wanted to make mention, we are working very closely with Denton County, as well as the city of Louisville, on the Denton County census. So just to kind of keep that in mind, if you don't currently follow DCTA on our social channels or the county on social, make sure that you do so. We're going to be spreading that message far and wide to make sure that we get as many people to respond as possible, knowing that that impacts funding across a lot of different different areas. And so that will be occurring in March, but we're already starting to push the message out and a big thank you to the county for all of their assistance as well.
Thank you. If I could elaborate on that, there is, obviously, a lot of the cities have major initiatives, and the county is here to support all of our municipalities in any way we can. Everybody should begin receiving their documents from the Census Bureau in March, I think March 12th or 14th, around that date, through the end of the month. You will be able to fill out your forms this year online, first time ever, and if you don't want to do them online, you could still do them by mail or phone. But just a 1% undercount in Denton County could potentially mean, and this is a very conservative number, $10 million a year, which over a 10-year period would be $100 million of federal funds that get allocated throughout the country. And that's money for schools, for infrastructure, for hospitals, all the community type, structures that we all use and need. So we are just asking everyone to please talk about it, talk to everyone you know, make sure people understand how important it is, and that there is one form for each household to fill it out. So I think you're going to be putting some, some signs up
Yes,
and
so we'll have,
giving some other.
we will have signs on the outside of our buses, that kind of act as rolling billboards, throughout the community. And then we also will have a digital toolkit. So once that digital toolkit's finalized, I know we're working with the county on that, we'll include that in one of the Friday emails, so that if you want to go ahead and put the information out on your social channels yourself, that you can do that, but like I said, you can follow, DCTA or the county and just share that message out as well.
Yes, we do have all that on our website as well. Thanks.
Okay, any other reports on items of community interest? Okay, well, I guess I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. That was unanimous. Thank you, everyone, for being here today. And Joe, welcome.
Thank you.